Okay, so defining the content of the gradient editor window. Between last video and here I have had a think, and this setup is not really going to work. It'll get really close to keeping these things in the correct position, with actually a slightly different arrangement to this, but really these color buttons should be centered on vertical lines and horizontal lines, which are very evenly spaced. And actually with this setup, with the sides aligned as I described it before, they'll be slightly off-center from these little lines. And I sort of foresaw, sorry, when I was thinking about this, that this might be a way of doing it, that there was going to be a catch, and this is the catch. As these boundaries scale with the changing width and height of the container gadget, the difference between the center of the color button and the boundary will also scale. I can set them up initially that whatever size the overall gadget is, these things are in the correct position, but they will drift slightly away from being half the color button's width from the exact center of where the color button should be. And I have thought over again the ways that I could arrange gadgets with my setup to make it work, and I just am not sure that there's an easy way to do it. There are a couple of options. One is I could go into my GUI and add a form of locking to the sides, so that you can no longer, it's not only just lock to the left, lock to the right, proportional to either side, that there's another option which is locked to the opposing side of this gadget. Now, that's a really weird thing to say, and I haven't thought through the logic of how the GUI would handle that internally. It might not be that easy. It's a wee bit of a palaver, which I would have to definitely remind myself the details of doing the resizing. I mean, I made it work, but I can't remember. Well, I do remember more or less how it works, which is how I remember that this may be a possibility, but it may have a little logical problem. The other option is that alongside finish work and alongside finish draw and work abstract methods or virtual methods on the work zone class, or on the gadget class, there's also finish resize, which is used by all sorts of things to position labels and icons correctly on gadgets when they get resized, which I could use. I could finish resize on the gradient editor class and have it look to its own edit panel, look to its contents, and position them all correctly. That's it's not impossible. Or I could finish resize. I could make a type of edit. I could make a type of gadget which was specifically for editing gradients and had a finish resize method of its own, which would be cleaner. It means that the edit panel would become a specific gadget. But I think that for the time being, I am going to take the easy way out, and it's not going to look as nice. I'm just going to have the color buttons scale with the size of the container gadget, the edit zone. Precisely what the edit zone, whether or not the edit zone will include these side gadgets, I haven't yet decided. I think it won't. Or one way or another, there will be an outer panel and an inner panel which contains only the display of the two-dimensional gradient. But I've got some idea about the structure of this now, and I'm going to, for the panel itself, for the array of gradient buttons, color buttons, I'm going to call it colors, and it's going to be an array of linked lists, which means that an array of linked lists of color buttons. So it's something like list color button, color, oops, what did I call it? I hate myself for this. It is color button, it's just for some reason. List color button. Right, yeah. That will be completely built inside the method I will shortly make, which will be something like update edit panel. And the horizontal and vertical controls, which are for adding and removing columns or rows, I think I'm going to split them into either 4 or 2 groups of add and subtract buttons. And I guess that what they might be like is... Now, this is where I get annoyed again over pedantic details. Something like horizontal add my button array, and horizontal remove my button array, and vertical add my button array, and vertical remove. Now, yeah, okay, my button. Again, these arrays will be completely created within the update edit panel method. So what I imagine them being, how do I imagine them being? Yeah, that this in the update edit panel method, which maybe I'll just start to think about. I could just call it update panel, but I'll say update edit panel. And another thing quite separate to the GUI that I need is a color. Which, when this is nude, no, not a color, a gradient set. And I'm going to call it GSet, which is going to annoy me later. Gradient set equals null. Right, yeah, I'd already decided that when this was created, this is a part of, this gradient editor gadget is a part of the recursor. It's going to refer to the recursor's own internal reference, or actually the project's internal reference to its own gradient set, to draw values from, to fill this gradient set, and it'll work on this gradient set, and then when you click apply, it'll copy the values back from this gradient set. So this actually does need to be a new gradient set, but nah, I can just, when you open it, I'll just have it copy, which means I'll need a gradient set copy method, I think, for to break things up in my mind, I suppose. Makes sense. But the edit panel itself, updating the edit panel will be about reading GSet. let's see. So I suppose the first thing I want to do is make sure that there's nothing in those and those lists already. And it's a boring thing to have to do, but I'm really going to have to do it. I'll bet there's, you know, ways of using multi-dimensional arrays that would sort of allow me to at least nest a loop here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to spell it all out as always. So I think I can just say, and again, I don't know if this is really wise doing this sort of thing. Seeing as I'm going to do a bunch of loops, I'm going to local this variable first, and I know they're not going to be nested or anything, so for I equals 0 until hor add length. Why now? I'm getting confused. It's going to tell me that's not allowed, isn't it? I sort of think it shouldn't. No, that's right, because I don't have the bracket after it. I know that arrays do allow you to find the length. So my understanding of this is if the length is 0, then it's not going to come into this loop. I'm terrible at this. Or add I, remove. And again, for I equals and then I guess hor add I equals null. That will remove is the gadgets method that will clean up this gadget and anything inside it. Just on the off chance that for some reason I put something bizarre into the hor add, horizontal add list. And then there's a thing I can't remember. Like horizontal add is now a list of however big it was. Is it a clear or anything like that? No, clean up. These are for gadgets. Okay, I'm going to go with this. This is when I start to worry I'm really misunderstanding something. Until there add length. Okay. This is boring, but for I equals 0 until there add. I bet I find out all of this is totally stupid. For some reason. I have made a mistake there, but okay. I'm making many mistakes there. Add I equals null. The order I meant to do this was horizontal horizontal remove. I'm thinking of these as two sets of buttons, two rows of buttons, even though I have them in two groups. And then this should be 0 until there remove, except all done correctly. And I have a funny feeling I'm going to have to do something similar. For the big colors thing. So this is also an array, so for I equals 0 until colors length about that one. And again, the color buttons are gadgets, so colors. But now it's not quite the same. Now I say local current color G color. Or here I suppose I can say for local current color equals H in. I'm not consistent, I know. Let me see each in colors I and no CC color button CC remove. Yeah. Let me think. Each in colors I. So that just removes the color button. That's fine. And then I can say. Okay, I've made a mistake there, have I? Right, I see. Of course. And I can say CC. No, colors I clear, and that will. This part of it removes the button from the GUI. It's being removed accurately, and this bit clears that column list of entries to effectively do the same thing as this. I'm not storing other references to the color buttons. This is my set of references, so when that's cleared, there are no more references like this. It's effectively nullifying. This is my thinking. And then I can say colors I equals null. So that even the list disappears? Yeah, because I have no idea how long these, like any of these lengths are going to be after. At the beginning, when this is called, it's when any change has been made to the, the number of columns or rows. So I don't really know how many that are going to be coming in, so I just nullify that to get rid of even the list, because the list may not exist. Right, yeah. Now, all of these arrays, my understanding is that they're still there in the same size, so it's like there's a bunch of empty references, so I could just like do something to clean that up as well, but my understanding is that these arrays are structs. So when I what am I thinking? Yeah, when I decide what size each of them has to be, I just kind of call a resize method, and it just gives me an array of the correct size with the contents of the old one, which will all be null. Or I think I could just say it equals a new array of the correct size. I think I'll probably do that anyway, so I don't think I have to do more at this moment. The next thing is about actually populating that panel, which will mean creating the panel. Because it's not only about populating the array of color buttons, it's about populating these two things. Well, I say because of that, but that is a thing. In here is where it will happen. Now, let me think. There's, yeah, so that method I've called update edit panel, so I may as well say edit panel contains both the gradient display and the gradient, the controls, the horizontal and vertical controls. Let me check my time. 20 minutes nearly. So there's another little, so sorry, the main thing I'm thinking just now is I'm not going to concentrate yet on displaying the gradient at the back of the edit panel. As long as I can get all the buttons in and working, that'll be massive. I can come back to that. It's not that tricky, I don't think. I will have to make a special gadget for it, but I think it should look okay. Right now I want to make sure I get all the other buttons in the right place, and I want to think that, come on, this horizontal row and this vertical row are one thing, but there's also a little tiny square up in this top corner which I think needs to exist because it'll look odd otherwise. Maybe I'll just leave it and add it in later, because there will be a little chunk taken out of what will otherwise be a sort of rectangular display. Anyway. So initially, prior to calling update edit zone, I think the only thing I want to determine is the gradient zone inside it. When this is newed, when it's instantiated, these buttons won't exist immediately. Update edit panel will be called at the end of new, and it will instantiate these buttons and the correct color buttons. At the beginning of new, at this moment, I'm actually just wanting to, I think, create another panel as well, which will be gradient panel. So the edit panel contains all the controls for changing the gradient, and the gradient panel contains for changing the gradient, yeah, maybe I should call this the color panel. And the color panel contains the color buttons. So button height equals line height. So I want edit panel equals new panel self. Now I'm going to cram this right up at the top left. Am I? Okay, I can maybe save myself a bit of trouble in the future here by making some more little. I always do this when I'm in constructors for gadgets with many pieces. I make these little local variables which describe maneuvers around the face of the panel, and I track this CXCY and I imagine it being a cursor. I'm moving across the screen, and so by setting some of these variables, it's as close as I can get to making it quick and easy to alter large proportions. Anyway, you know, that spread across an entire gadget as long as one depends on the next, and so on and so forth. The thing I want to think about here is how much of a border to the left and top of the edit panel do I want to leave for potentially other labels. And I'm going to call it left label size, LLS, and top label size. Float equals, it's going to be button height, and top label size. No, at this moment it will not. It will be 0.0. It could be made into button height. Just for my form of neatness, I will take that out. Left label size, top label size could be button height. Okay. So here I want to say the X position of the new panel is left label size, and the top position is top label size. The width of it is face width minus left label size, and the height of it is, no, the height of it is something else. In here, I'll say a local edit panel height float equals face height minus button height minus border edit panel height. So this is a way of me saying, kind of around, collecting together a lot of pieces of information about how this is set out. That's my vague thinking. The benefit of this is I do want the edit panel to basically occupy most of the window. This tells me that it occupies the window minus the height of a button minus the border. That leaves space at the bottom for the apply, cancel buttons, and if I cram them in, the top and bottom threshold buttons. And that's the way I'm going to make it just now. See how it looks. I have some other ideas about the way it could be arranged, but for now that would, cram the things in, which I like in an old-fashioned way. And I think about we'll see how it goes. I can always change it, but the point is, if I do decide to change it, I can change this around and just automatically force the edit panel to occupy a different amount of space. And it might help other things fall into place more easily. Anyway, so this is going to be edit panel height. In flag is going to be true in this case for now, and it's not going to have any other costume or anything like that. And this has to be aligned. The left hand side I want locked low, so it's locked to the left. The right hand side I want locked high, so it's locked to the right. The top I want locked low, so it's locked to the top, and the bottom I want locked high, so it's locked to the bottom. So whenever the window gets resized, this effectively resizes with the window. No aspect of it doesn't. And the bottom of what that technically means is the left hand side will stay the same distance from the left hand side of its parent gadget as I've defined it. The right hand side will stay the same distance from the right hand side. If I'd said 0 here, then the right hand side of the edit panel would have stayed the same distance from the left hand side of its parent gadget. I love this system. It's crazy, but I love it. So, not crazy at all. It's very popular, I think. I don't know. I'm too incompetent and inexperienced to know. So, inside the edit panel there's also the color panel. Equals new panel. I happened to look at the task manager the other day, and doing the video is taking more than half my processing power apparently, so it's no surprise it's taking so long to, don't know why that came to my mind. Anyway, so the color panel is a new panel, and its parent is the edit panel, because it always sits inside it, and the X position of it is button height, and the Y position of it is button height, because I want this offset from the top left of the overall edit panel by the width of, by the width of a button and the height of a, I'm not describing that well, its X and Y position both to be the height of a button, so that the buttons that are arranged down the side and along the top have one button width, or one button height space. And its width should be, now, this is where I should definitely, for the sake of it, just make a couple more, and say edit panel, I just call it edit face width float equals edit panel face width edit face height float equals edit panel face height. I don't know if I'll use those again, but edit face width minus button height, comma, edit face height minus button height. And that's not an inflect. This is actually, this should not be a panel, this should be a zone. Did I already make it a zone? Because if I was being clever. I didn't. Panels by default have a border and an appearance. They do look like this, whatever the sort of standard skin is for the GUI as it's set up, the panels will take it on. A zone is an invisible thing. This is a panel and I'm using the in option, so it looks like it's set into it. So this is not really panel, this is actually zone. It'll mean that this is invisible but existent. And color zone, align sides. Again, this, I want the left hand side locked to the left hand side of the edit panel, the top locked to the top of the edit panel, the right locked to the right, I mean, the top locked to the top and the bottom locked to the bottom. And for now that's it. And now, for now, what I will do is I will think about getting ahead of myself and doing a copy for gradients and gradient sets. And I will do a load. I will basically complete the gradient set class. That's a very boring thing to have to do. It shouldn't be too difficult because there's already a read and write for individual gradients. But I better make a copy. And I'll need copy of gradient. And I have no consistency here. Do I want copy to, copy from? I think I have copy to, and it will be void, and I'll receive a gradient set. And I will check it to make it could be not. You see, here I am again. Do I want to have the control over whether or not copy to me implies that the gradient set already exists. I wish I could dream up a sort of a way of describing the set of things I want to do to objects, which I could be so consistent with across objects, which is sometimes I want to copy to an existent gradient set, sometimes I want a new object from an object. Sometimes, yeah, well actually, are those the only two options? I'm sure there's a well-worn way of doing this. Anyway, for the moment what I'm going to say is you make your own damn gradient set. Give it to me and I'll copy it in. So it's pretty simple, isn't it? For a local current gradient set, local current gradient equals each in gradients, and what I do to the current gradient. Okay, right. Yeah, okay. I do, you know, inevitably I remember, oh yeah, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. Colors and splines only contain numbers. They don't, you know, when I nullify a reference to a spline, it'll get cleared up. When I nullify a reference to a color, it'll get cleared up. So, to remove a gradient completely, because it only contains these things, I just nullify its reference. So the first thing I do is I say, actually dude, for, okay, local current gradient is null. For current gradient equals each in gradient set gradients. Current gradient. Sorry, I just need to clear it. Isn't that right? Yeah, that's what I was getting at, is actually I don't need to do more clearing up. And I'm deleting all. Gradient set. Gradients. Clear. Assuming that the gradient set you've sent in, the gradients within its set, aren't linked to anywhere else, that will clean them up. But if they are linked to anywhere else, then those references get to keep them. I always have to go through this. So let me check time again. 35. I'm going to have to stop soon. I'll see if I can get to the end of this by 40 and then call it a vid. Current gradient equals each in gradients. So I could say GS gradients add last. And this is where add color, insert color, calculate gradient, get red, get green, get blue. This is where a copy to a different type obviously would be useful, wouldn't it? Really what I need to say is local new gradient with new gradient. This was a situation where I left my new completely blank, knowing that there'd be a situation like this where I'd want to give, but then on the other hand I could say function new from, couldn't I? And use source gradient. The only thing that ever stops me doing this is the fact I feel like I'm now making inconsistencies. Local new gradient equals new gradient, and then I go through the colors of SG and I create a new color with a copy and add it right. And add color always, so I'm not going to call add color because every time I add color it calculates the gradient. So I'm just going to do that bit of it. Yeah, in fact that's perfect. So what I do is I say for a local current color, hang on, G color equals each in source gradient colors. Next. Oops, not quite. Next. Then new gradient colors add last a new color based on current color red, current color green, current color blue, and current color alpha. And then at the end of that I say new gradient calculate gradient, and I return new gradient. What on earth is all this gibberish? Arc, no, okay, yeah, was I actually clever about my How do you like that? G? Okay. Right. New from. So gradient set. Yeah. I'm going to help myself here. Out. Out. Gradients. Clear. Be gone. Out. Gradients. Add last. Gradient. New from current gradient. Have I got that at all right? Out gradients, add last. Gradient, new from current gradient. Yeah, okay. So, is that it? Why do I feel like this should be kind of structured new from as well? Or, you know, a terrible name maybe, but that basic gist where you pass. Anyway, so hang on, is that really it? Loading and saving. I better just do this because I'm going to get so annoyed coming out of the code and back into it if it's not saving. So this equals a new gradient set and it returns it, and this writes it. So this has to fill in the details. So it's going to read a number of colors. A gradient is, once it's created, it's got the splines and the list, and it's ready to have colors added to it. It's just how many colors. So the first thing, you can have a quick look at calculate gradient, make sure it's doing what I think. Okay, yeah, so it's going through the colors. Right, that's when it calculates the node. So yeah, just adding last. Okay, so I'm always anxious about this. Local num. Actually, before I do that, what do I do in loading here? Okay, yeah, so I just load set of colors. Colors equals readant. Writes the colors and writes each color. Reads the color, reads each color, then calculates the gradient. So here I'm local numgrads uint equals fs read uint if numgrads equals 0 return null, otherwise for local n uint equals until numgrads. Next. So if there are no numgrads, if there's one that does one, okay. And what do I do in here? Here I say gradients add last gradient read from fs. Am I in any way right about that? This should not be as it is. That's for a create. When I knew a gradient set in here. I don't want anything in that at all. I just want the list that I can add things to. Out, gradients, clear, add last. Okay, gradients, add last, read. Okay, so now I say fs write unsigned int gradients count for local n unsigned int equals until hang on, that's not right. For local current gradient equals each in gradients current gradient write to file stream. What's the problem with this? Gradients cannot be accessed at an instant. This is not right either. Actually, hang on a sec. Yes, it is. Field gradients. Oh, sorry. This is new gradient set. I do, like so many things in coding, I'm just a bit uncertain about reading and writing to files. Also up here, just while I'm thinking about it, I need to check this when I'm loading certain things. Here I'm loading a color, for example, and when I load a color, read a color, if not, yeah, so it may return null. So I need to check, because I am already checking here, when I'm not simply reading one of the, primitives, when I'm reading one of my own classes, like, whatever, corner set, I check it there. Here I also have to check. If, and I'll just do the lot, if not np paper color, return null. If not np ink color, and this is kind of important because it means that if I change the format of the save file, or if the save file gets corrupted or removed, or more if it gets corrupted, I suppose, then the editor has to realize that it's failed to load. And it already does check, like at the moment. Okay, I'll go and make sure it does check that if this returns null, it just generates a default project. Is there any other time I'm reading ints, floats, bools, and that's it? And so there, in the recursor class, I have an open function which sets up these things, sets up GUI, loads the state, then it says does current exist, project equals load the project, if not project, project equals project create, if the file doesn't exist. So basically that should do it. I think that those were the only custom classes loaded inside the project load function, method function. Okay, so I'm going to call it a day just now because that's already nearly 50 minutes. And what I have done is created write, read write, proper read write and copy functions, methods for gradient sets, and a couple of other useful things for gradient, which will make it easier, in fact possible now, inside the gradient editor to, first off, take a copy of the project's gradient set for me to work on until it's applied or cancelled. So no running today at all, but I'm going to call it a day just now and carry on very soon. Just out of curiosity, check this out. Come on, I know somewhere in there I can get the taskbar. Task manager, sorry. 63%, that command processor. Joyful. Bye.